The Lebanese government has resigned following a devastating explosion in the capital Beirut last week. Prime Minister Hassan Diab made the announcement a few hours ago. The blast stirred public outrage and spurred a string of ministers to step down.
The August 4 port warehouse detonation of more than 2,000 tons of ammonium nitrate killed at least 163 people, injured over 6,000 and destroyed swaths of the bustling Mediterranean capital, compounding months of political and economic meltdown. The cabinet formed in January with the backing of the powerful Iranian-backed Hezbollah group and its allies met on Monday. For many ordinary Lebanese, the explosion was the last straw in a protracted crisis over the collapse of the economy, endemic corruption, waste and dysfunctional governance, and they've taken to the streets demanding root and branch change. The Information and Environment ministers quit on Sunday, as well as several lawmakers, and the Justice Minister followed them out the door on Monday. Sources say Finance Minister Ghazi Wazni, a key negotiator with the IMF over a rescue plan to help Lebanon exit a financial crisis, prepared his resignation letter and brought it with him to the cabinet meeting. Lebanon's president had previously said explosive material was stored unsafely for years at the port. He later said the investigation will consider whether the cause was external interference as well as negligence or an accident. Anti-government protests in the past 2 days have been the biggest since October, when angry demonstrations spread over an economic crisis rooted in pervasive graft, mismanagement and high-level unaccountability. Protesters accuse the political elite of siphoning off state resources for their own benefit.
Well, we're joined now via Zoom by political activist and a member of Citizens in a State, who is also a lecturer at the Lebanese American University, Dr. Rania Masri. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program again. The last time we spoke just about the explosions, but it seems a lot has happened then, and there was already anger at that point. But that anger has been mounting, I guess, and this is what has led to these resignations today.
Yes, very much so, very much so. There's been a very high level of outrage. Keep in mind that we've been outraged in the country since October of last year. But of course, the outrage that has exploded after the explosion has been very high, to say the least. And the resignations that we have seen that began yesterday and accumulated with the resignation of the Prime Minister, thereby, the resignation of the entire cabinet. These resignations are not only a response to the protest, they're also a response to the catastrophe itself, and they're also a response to the political parties that are propping up this government, Hassan Diab's government, that their realization that the role of this government has ended. And now is the time for a new government to fulfill a new role. So here lies a critical question. What will this new government be like? And what role will it be playing?
Is it fair, though, to blame this new government for the ills of the country, given that they've only been at the helm for a few months, literally?
Yes, it is fair. It is fair for a number of reasons. One, let me be very clear. We do not hold them only responsible. All the governments since 2013 until now are responsible for the catastrophe at the port, because they all knew or were responsible for their ignorance of not knowing. So this government is not the only one responsible, but most definitely it does carry responsibility. Let us add to the fact that this government came at a time of Lebanon's worst case. We've never been bankrupt before. We've been broken before, but never bankrupt before. This government chose to accept the responsibility of leading the country out of bankruptcy, and yet they came with not a single vision, no economic vision, no political vision, no social vision, and they actually took not one decision. So even before the explosion, this government had showed itself to be incompetent and to have complete ineptitude at doing anything that was necessary. But that wasn't why this government was chosen. This government wasn't chosen by the sectarian political parties who brought it to office because they found it to be capable. This government was chosen to play a particular role to call outrage in the October of last year, and to continue the masquerade of the sectarian political system. Now that the outrage in the streets cannot allow this government to continue, the sectarian political parties will remove this government. So the big question is, where do we go from here? Will we allow these sectarian political leaders to simply change the faces and give us a new government that will continue the same policies of incompetence and corruption and ineptitude? Or will they finally realize, these sectarian political leaders, that if we continue within the same political system, we're only going to have more and more tragedies? So the resignation is a good thing. It's a good thing that this government resigned, but that's not the end of the struggle. Not by far is it the end of the struggle.
Should the president also be falling on his sword?
Well, it's not so much about, we don't want individuals to fall on their swords. We don't want individuals to just submit to resignations. A resignation in and of itself is not enough. What is critical is for the ones that step aside to step then out of the sectarian political system and into a political system that can actually take this country forward. Simply resigning is like playing backgammon, choosing not to do one move while doing another move, but maintaining within that same system. What we're saying is that the system itself is faulty. So I'm not necessarily asking for the resignation of the president per se, but more so for these sectarian leaders, and this president is one of those leaders, actually take this country forward in building something that is needed to be built, which is a civil, secular state. That is what we need. We hope that they will not simply come up with another government that looks like this one with similar faces. And I've been very pleased to see that one of the chants that's come out of the protest today in response to this resignation, people are saying no to the previous prime minister. The previous prime minister, Saad al-Hariri, who also is sectarian and maintained the same system. People are being very clear that we do not want this government to be replaced by people of his ilk. We want something new, something that actually can lead the country forward. And that government would have to be a secular government, not one that simply claims to be of national unity and maintain the same political sectarian system.
All right, help our viewers understand. You've said sectarian system quite a number of times now. What does that mean for people outside looking in? What's the setup?
Okay, it's not as destructive as the political apartheid system in South Africa, but in some ways it is similar. And it is similar because a sectarian system looks at an individual and denies that individual any citizenship and any egalitarian identity, and simply sees that individual as being part of a caste, part of a community into which that individual cannot leave. And so then we are not seen as citizens, we are seen as members of these sectarian communities, okay? Not looking at it religiously, it's not an issue of religious identity. It has nothing to do with how I choose to worship God. It's not about that. It's about a system that the colonialists gave us, the French, and all of those who were supporting that system have maintained in Lebanon. And by the way, they want to take it to other countries in the region. So you have this representation, we are Christians and Muslims. We are Sunnis and Shia and Maronites and Greek Orthodox, which we can be, and we can also be citizens. But the sectarian system looks at these communities and defines them as communities per se, and then says, well, based on the size of this community, we will then determine how many representatives this community can have in public office. Right. So therefore, if you're really large, you get the presidency, or you get the Speaker of the House, or you get the prime ministership. But what is this nonsense? Can't we simply have a system where the best man or best woman is elected to the best public office, rather than one in which we are held hostage to these perceived and artificial communities, again, into which we were forced into? It is a system that denies us citizenship. And it is a system, again, I have to repeat, that was brought to us by the colonial powers and has been maintained and has been used as a model system for the region. This is what we mean by a sectarian system.
All right, so is this the moment, do you think, that out of this tragedy of these explosions, that perhaps a new system of politics in the country might be delivered? How hopeful are you that we might see this difference?
Well, it's a possibility. There are several scenarios here. One scenario is that we will end up, by the way, this government is still in power. They simply are a caretaker government. But one scenario is that we will end up with another government that looks like it. Okay. We could have another scenario where there becomes a complete breakdown in the country because we already are seeing divisions between the groups of political sectarian leaders. And in that event, then we could end up with violence, and we could end up with a real problem in the country of increased oppression and violence. The third scenario that we have been working valiantly for is to build a political alliance of all the political parties in this country that really believe in a civil secular state. And for us then to be in charge of a transitional government to take our country forward from the sectarian system to a civil state, to assist us in distributing the losses of this economic bankruptcy so that the vulnerable do not bear too high of a burden. And then at the end of that transition to have parliamentary elections under a just electoral law. What is the possibility for this? It is a possibility, but I cannot tell you how high that chance is. It is just a chance that we are working to build as valiantly as possible. It is one of several scenarios that we have in front of us right now. And we are hoping not only that these sectarian leaders will finally see that if they continue on this pathway, they're also continuing towards their own destruction, but we're also hoping to build our own political alliance and to be able to transform the outrage that we see in the streets into some kind of political clarity. Because outrage without clarity can easily be co-opted and manipulated, and that can also be divisive and destructive. So it is a possibility. But is it the only possibility? No. But it is one possibility, yes, for sure.
All right. Dr. Masri, I've got a feeling we're probably going to be chatting to you again soon. But thanks so much indeed for giving us more insights, particularly on the last day and today's developments. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, that's Dr. Rania Masri, who is a Lebanese lecturer at Lebanese American University, talking to us about the situation in Lebanon. The cabinet there has resigned. They carry on in a caretaker role until the new cabinet's announced. So we'll see how things develop there. We're going to be back after the break.